Welcome back. This is Curtis Hordge, a licensed and abundant public insurance adjuster. I want to talk to you today about pipe burst and freeze claims. In Texas in 2021, there was a major freeze that hit our state, and it caused a lot of damage to a lot of properties, and there were a lot of claims. There were rolling outages with the power companies where people would have power for so many hours, it'd be cut off, and then it'd turn back on again. It was very cold in the house. People were trying to stay warm as they could. It was tough. It was snow on the ground. Nobody could go anywhere like they wanted to, and it was very hard because Texas doesn't usually suffer these type of losses with a lot of snow and stuff like that, as you know. If you live here, you know. They say in Texas, if you don't like the weather, stick around. It'll change. And that year in 2021 was pretty horrific. The Texas grid nearly failed. And I was hearing that they said that it was so bad to where a guy was in his car, in the back of his car, being driven to the power station on his laptop. His laptop had the information to save the grid, and that's how close we came to losing our grid. It was just that serious. And had that happened, it would have been a disaster. A lot of people would have died. Nobody would have been able to get heat. It's just been terrible. Insurance companies were hit with hundreds of thousands of claims in one day. I heard Allstate got hit with 150,000 claims in one day. That's what I heard. I mean, it was just so many companies got hit with different claims. When people, pipes were bursting, freeze claims. It was just terrible. The insurance company attorneys at that time just went through the policies and started combing through the policies and making sure they took advantage of everything they could to make sure they can capitalize on whether people had coverage or not. In other words, they made sure that you do everything you're supposed to do as a consumer to make sure you had adequate coverage. If you didn't do something you're supposed to do, then you breached the contract. We're not covering it. In other words, they became very strict, making sure the consumers did what they're supposed to do. They got certain procedures they're supposed to do, and you have certain procedures you're supposed to do. If you don't do your part, then they can charge you to say, well, you didn't do your part, so we're excluding this coverage. If they don't do their part, you got to go through the loops to try to get them to accept that they breached the contract, and normally that includes getting an attorney or maybe some kind of other process in the policy like the appraisal or arbitration. And we talked about that before as well. The Texas freeze calculated $195 billion worth of damage. That's almost like a major hurricane. And I don't know if they did anything to the grid to stop if this happens again. A lot of people say nothing's been done. I don't know. I'm not in that business to know if there actually been any changes in our system to help us be able to protect ourselves from something like that happening again. But if it does, I pray that we do be able to handle that, because if not, it's going to be serious. Because I think the way weather works, I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not a person that knows a lot about that. But I just kind of feel sometimes when the weather's going to be stronger than we think it's going to be, sometimes the meteorologists are wrong, even with their reports. I know they got good scientific data and evidence, but sometimes they could be wrong. We've seen that. But I feel like this winter may be kind of, a little stronger than we needed to be or wanted to be, and we could find ourselves headed toward a major storm where we can see snow and ice, and the Texas grid will be overwhelmed. And hopefully, like I say, we'll have it'll be able to handle whatever is given to make sure people can stay warm in their houses, and the outages won't be as long. And people lost their food. People lost a lot of things. Restaurants lost their food. There's a lot of things that was like during that situation that people had losses. There was collapse from the snow and ice on covered ports, carports. Roofs collapsed, and it was a lot of situation. Because what happened was it snowed, then it sleeted on top of the snow, then it snowed again, and it's like it just stuck down. It was really heavy, and so people had a hard time trying to just find some warmness and try to get back to some normalcy. But the insurance companies were scrambling. And one thing you couldn't find, it was two things you couldn't find at that time, was a plumber. If you had a pipe burst, first thing you do is call a plumber. Couldn't find them. They were everywhere. And their prices were changing as the time go on because it was supply and demand. And also you couldn't find a restoration company to come dry your house out. They were few and far in between too. People came from other states to come down here and work. A lot of different companies came to come out and work these claims, and a lot of them I found out they didn't know Texas procedures and policies of what you have to do after a water loss. And for the most part, the insurance companies was pretty much okay on it. They kind of worked around it, but I wouldn't want to get caught in a situation where I'm not doing something right on a Texas insurance policy because they're getting strict. And I was talking to a friend of mine today. We was talking about how so many things they're requiring to prove that you have the damage. them coming out and see the damage is not enough. They want to prove that that TV doesn't work. So have someone come out and diagnose that TV and see why it's not working. Can it be repaired? Does it have to be replaced? It's not, you got water in your TV and that's not enough. You have to make sure you prove that it's beyond repair before they pay for it now. They just making you go through a lot of more things you normally didn't go through in the last 24 years of doing this business I've never seen before. When they combed through those policies and found all these things that they were not taking advantage of, they started taking advantage of them. And they hadn't stopped. And they're still going, and still going. And the industry's changing out here in Texas so fast. You know, the insurance companies are buckling down and get into a trench position to where it's almost impenetrable to get them to pay claims properly. And that's sad. You know what I'm saying? It makes our job a lot harder. We know what to do. The average property owner may not know what to do. That's why it's important that you hire a public adjuster to make sure you have a fighting chance of getting a proper settlement on your claim. Some insurance companies didn't make it. They folded. They went into receivership and were sold off to other companies. Some companies merged. You know, smaller companies were bought out by bigger companies, and they're still doing that today. They were trying to salvage themselves from having so many claims hit at one time. They didn't have enough adjusters to handle all the claims that came in. You probably didn't see adjuster till like a month and a half. People were calling trying to get into hotels. The hotels were booked. They were calling and trying to get into Airbnbs. Well, actually, they would get into rental properties. The insurance company usually didn't allow Airbnbs because they were so expensive. Because of the lack of availability on houses and available properties to rent, they had to open up and let people use Airbnbs. They're trying to back out of that now. Now they want to go back to fair market value. That means like if you're in a house in a neighborhood, what does it cost to rent a house in your neighborhood? That's what they want to cap you at as far as what you allowed to get to rent. Your fair market value of what's in your neighborhood, what you're actually living in. Now you're outside your house. What's the fair market value in your neighborhood? That's what we allow you to do. But that's not working a lot because the availability is still up and down. And most of the time they have to get something that's a little bit more toward the Airbnb rather than doing a lease with an apartment or some kind of house, because most of these landlords want to do small term leases. And most of the time these leases are 4 to 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, sometime a year. That may be good if it's a year, but if it's less than that, the landlords are not willing to do those short-term leases like they used to. The industry's changed a lot. But I want to say this. Some of the things you want to be concerned about going into this winter season, I got some information I want to tell you about. Check your doors and windows and make sure you have no drafts, no cracks or leaks. Make sure your windows and doors are keeping your heat inside your house. Seal up any gaps with caulking or weather stripping to make sure you keep your house warm. It's very, very important. Insulate your open pipes. Very, very important. Some policies won't even cover your water freeze claim or your pipe freeze claim, pipe burst claim, unless you have your pipes insulated. That's what happened. A lot of people's pipes were insulated and they burst. And so they went through the policy and they said, now, if it wasn't protected with insulation, then we don't owe it. So you want to make sure you got any exposed pipes, copper, metal, lead, whatever. You want to cover those pipes with insulation. You can buy that stuff at Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever. Cover your faucets outside. Make sure you cover them with the plastic cover, the foam covers. And I've seen people the ones that come out the ground, I've seen people put a rag over that and duct tape it. But whatever it is, just cover it. It's good to do that because anything exposed to that type of weather could freeze. We want to drain your hoses. Take your hose. I'll take my hoses off. I disconnect all my hoses and put them in a dry storage or something like that. Or I don't leave them because you let that water sit in and will bust your hose. It could do that. Turn off your sprinkler system. That's important. Don't you hate it when you see some 40 degrees, it's raining outside, somebody got their sprinkler system on? Turn off your sprinkler system, please, especially when it's freezing, because you have a problem if you don't. If you own a tankless water heater, it's important that you drain it during a freeze. Because I had a claim to where I was called out by the lake, and they had a tankless water heater, and the insurance company had in the policy, if it was not drained before the freeze, they don't owe it. And guess what? It was not drained, they didn't owe it. That was a pretty major loss, too. Caused a lot of water damage and stuff like that. So drain those tankless water heaters during the freeze. They're supposed to be done to make sure you don't mess up any components in that. Leave your faucets dripping, inside your house. Leave your faucets dripping during the freeze and make sure they don't freeze up. Keep some activity moving. That's very, very important. Check your policy. Check your policy to make sure you're covered with pipe burst freeze. Make sure you're covered with pipe burst and freeze claims, because some policies are very specific about what they cover in those areas. You want to talk to your agent if you know your agent, and make sure you ask the question that you need to ask to make sure you have the proper coverage that you need. I would definitely go through that portion of the policy that talks about pipe burst, freeze, subsurface water, above surface water, leaks. It's important you do that, because insurance companies, once you have a major disaster like that in Texas, the insurance policies change, and they normally change to the benefit of the insurance company and not to you. That's just the way it is. They're going to change to protect themselves. And I know if I had a company and I got hit with 150,000 claims one day, there's some changes going to be made. Even like when the mold era back in early 2000, a lot of people got the houses gutted out and they found out mold is everywhere. So you need three things: water, moisture, and something to eat, like sheetrock or wood. And then constant moisture would keep it where it get worse and worse. But they put stipulation in the policy. Now you have to pay a whole lot of money to get any coverage for mold. It's normally like $5,000 they'll pay for it, and they'll try to cap it at that. And that's just the way it is. But I want to tell you, like I say, beware. The weather may get bad for us in the next month or two. And I'm asking that you would just protect your property, protect yourself. And I'll be back with another show. I want to talk to you about other things that happen in the cold weather. And we'll be back with you later. Thank you guys for listening and tuning in. This is Hordge Adjuster, National Adjustment Services, the licensed and bonded public adjuster Curtis Hordge. And I thank y'all for listening. Stay tuned.